So first of all, would like to congratulate you and your team on a great 2020. This is a very interesting platform, and as you just described, this is the future. I think we needed such an alternative, and you and many other entrepreneurs in the podcast space or in the, as you said, the Substack space are coming up with a very attractive alternative. And this is definitely going to capture market share in the coming years. And all the best for Bharat Varta for 2021. I think you've already done 99, hoping for many, many more. So let's move on to my topic. I'm going to spend about just 3-4 minutes and then maybe take a few questions about startups in 2020. I think we have had a very interesting year, and that's just a very general statement. It's been interesting at many different levels. Of course, it's been depressing and scary as well. But specifically from a point of view of startups, I think 2020, the pandemic has provided a great set of challenges and a great set of opportunities. Now, like everything else, there are some startups that have made the most of these opportunities, and there are some startups that have struggled because of the challenges, right? So let's come back to the specifics as far as India is concerned. India did see a good amount of activity on the startup front in terms of the number of deals that happened or in terms of number of investment rounds that happened. We had about 1,100, which was roughly similar to what we saw last year or last few years. Now, some of the larger investment rounds, the 100 million plus investment rounds, were a little less. As a result, the total number this year was around 9 billion, which was a little less than what we saw last year, but similar to what we have had 3-4 years. So not a big change there, I would think. We also had some good exits, both specifically at the India level, also many big names at the international level. I'm sure everyone would have seen the massive IPOs of Airbnb and DoorDash and the acquisitions of Slack. So in general, it was a great year globally for startups in terms of exits. In India also, we saw some excellent valuations of some of the larger unicorns. We have one or two that have moved on to the Decacorn category, which is a 10 billion plus valuation. And we expect to see some good exits in the next 1-2 years via the IPO route. Some of the bigger names in the Indian startup scene will see that exit. So I think that the reason I'm highlighting about the big funding rounds, the overall funding scenario and the exits is because ultimately this is one of the key drivers of the startup movement, right? I mean, in terms of unless you get a lot of funding, unless you see exits, you're not going to get more interesting people getting into the startup space. So I think this is looking quite good for India. This has been a very big driver in Silicon Valley, as you know, for over 2-3 decades now, right? Now, in terms of the number of startups, I was just looking at Startup India, and in terms of registrations on Startup India, we see over 40,000 startups, around 40,000 startups registered there. Now, this is one metric. Of course, these metrics change, and there are different attributes that are used to see if something is a startup or not. But this number has grown significantly over the last year as well. So this is another healthy sign, right? Now, let me specifically talk about in the next minute or two about the challenges and opportunities, right? Challenges, obviously, depending on the kind of market that you were in, there were tremendous challenges in terms of reaching out to customers. If you were not completely online, if you were not cloud-based, or if you were in a space that required people-to-people contact, then clearly your startup struggled. Also, hiring was a big challenge for startups. I mean, it was a challenge for everyone, but particularly for startups that didn't have a big name, a big identity, and to recruit people remotely and get them working remotely and getting them part of the process was also a challenge. But we have seen startups, I've seen quite a few here in Pune that I'm in active contact with, go about that in a very, very effective manner. In terms of opportunities, as you know, there were huge opportunities in terms of addressing the new problems. The work from home was the single biggest challenge that was available, and everyone knows the Zoom story. But there are many small startups providing various kinds of remote solutions, cloud-based solutions that saw significant uptick in opportunities and demand simply because some things had to be done completely differently from the way they were being done in the past. The remote work, the remote workflows for think of a business process. So I have some involvement in the recruiting space. The entire recruiting process moved online, all the way from not just from the assessment part, but the interview part, the negotiation part, the onboarding part, and then finally starting a new employee. There are companies today, there are startups today that haven't seen an employee ever in person, and that person's already been contributing for 6 months. So that has been a very interesting opportunity. The other set of opportunities that came way to the Indian startups, many Indian startups, especially in the gaming space and some other areas, is the action by the government of India, which resulted in banning of a bunch of different Chinese apps, right? I think that was also an interesting opportunity for some companies, some startups especially, to jump on. And the last point that I'll highlight, which again everyone here would be very familiar with, is the edtech space. I think education was one of the biggest sectors that was impacted. And again, for the startups in the education space, this has been a big uptick, specifically because pretty much the entire education, all the way from first standard or even before, all the way to graduate school, have moved online. So Indian edtech startups have done well, as has been the case worldwide. And this opportunity, the fundamental change of remote work, remote education, some of these changes are going to be with us for probably forever. And startups that are in this space are going to see a very good uptick in the coming years.